Hi everybody, my name is Abraham and I'm coming back to you with another educational video based on how to achieve sustainable sobriety as it pertains to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If this is your first time on this channel, please first listen to what we have to say, and if you are in agreement with what we're saying, press the like button. Please subscribe to the channel and help us carry the message to the person who is still suffering, both in and out of the rooms. We are on this channel to pretty much try to live up to the standard of what Bill W. said for the newcomer. And he said that our chief aim or our chief responsibility as people in recovery is to the newcomer, and it is an adequate presentation of the program. In other words, a sufficient or a simple explanation to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in order to be free of alcoholism. So I have a lot to talk about this afternoon. I want to do a couple of things today. One, I want to wrap up step one, and number two, I want to cover the promises, which are 16 promises that are associated with one who completes, I said completes step one. And we'll go over that, and it's very, very simple. So, as we often say, pull out your big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and your 12 and 12. And if you can't get to those right now, watch the video, go back, rewind, replay the video, and underscore or underline the things that I'm highlighting for you as it pertains to our book and step one. This is my fulfillment of trying to help the newcomer by educating them on how simple this program is in order to work. Okay, so as we often say, we don't want to waste your time, so let's get right into it. In the 12 and 12, it says that step one pretty much is the only step that we have to work 100% perfectly. And that's found on page 68 of the 12 and 12. And it is the first paragraph, and I'll read it for you, and you go back and you underline everything that I'm saying, so you will see that my opinions are not integrated in these teachings, okay? They're out of AA approved literature. Many will at once ask, how can we accept the entire implication of the step? Why that is perfection? This sounds like a hard question, but practically speaking, it isn't. Only step one, where we made the 100% admission we were powerless over alcohol, can be practiced without absolute perfection. The remaining 11 steps state perfect ideals. They are goals towards which we look and the measuring stick by which we estimate our progress. So it tells us right there that only step one has to be worked perfectly. In other words, you have to be completely convinced that you're an alcoholic. I want to say something else, and this is something I want you to take note of. Step one is the most misquoted step in all of the 12 steps, and I'll tell you why. And is not in step one. But people often say, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives have become unmanageable. And is not in there because if and was in step one would be a two-part statement, and we know that's an untruth. It says that our lives have become unmanageable. Now, I want to give you some depth and some weight because we teach on this channel. I'm not opposed to any other channels that you look at. I suggest you do, but you evaluate ours by the effectiveness of what we are teaching you as it pertains to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Here's a question. What is the goal of the person that is in recovery? Well, that's clearly found on Roman numeral page XIII. Let's go to it. Forward to the first edition. The goal of every person in recovery is found in the first sentence. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So therefore, our goal as people in recovery is simply to recover from the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body known as alcoholism. And we know what alcoholism simply is. Page 44, the first paragraph tells us what alcoholism is. Go to page 44. Let's look at the first paragraph, but let's look at the last three sentences of that paragraph. If that be the case, meaning you're alcoholic, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So that tells us right there that there's no chemical solution for our spiritual problem. Now, we know the goal, but the next thing we need to know is how. Most people don't tell us, how do we recover from alcoholism? Well, if you stay in the doctor's opinion and you go to Roman numeral page XXIX, it simply tells us how to recover from the illness which is called alcoholism. And I like to start at the first paragraph. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, guess who doesn't understand? The newcomer, because the newcomer has never went through the process. And some of the people who have been around who are clean and never got sober because they continue to tell you we never recover, it's a lifetime process, and all these other things that is not in the book. Notice what it says. Once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. That's how we recover from it, but let's look at what those few simple rules are. Dr. Bob eloquently reduced them to 6 words, and they're found on page 98. Let's go to page 98, and let's look at the second paragraph. Burn the idea into the conscious, not the subconscious, because we're no longer a slave to our subconscious, of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. You can't even say that in some meetings because they tell you never do get well. The only condition is that he trusts in God and clean house. And look at what chapter we're reading, working with others. So the way that we do recover is we have the psychic change. The process produces 3 simple things. Trust God, first 3 steps. Clean house, step 4 through 11. And last but not least, help others. So as you see, the process produces the result. Step 12 said, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So taking the 12 steps produces a spiritual awakening. Now if we look at page 14, we'll see something that is really interesting. And we'll see what Bill says. Bill says, these were revolutionary and drastic proposals. But the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. So guess what Bill just told us? Bill just told us that he had a spiritual awakening once he went through the process that Evie taught him from the Oxford group, which was simply broken down into 4 things: surrender, first 3 steps; sharing, step 4 through 7; restitution, step 8 and 9; and last but not least, guidance, step 10 through 12. And we'll get into that later. But watch this. That process produced the result, which is the spiritual awakening. Now, if we look at page 17, we'll see that. First paragraph. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They've solved the drink problem. So, just recapping. We know that the principle behind step 1 is honesty. And we know that the directions to take in step 1 are found on page 30. We've already said that, but I want to reiterate it. Go to page 30. Look at the second paragraph. We learn that we have to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. So, step 1 is simply a yes or no answer. If you concede or admit to your innermost selves that you're alcoholic, congratulations, you just did step 1. Now notice, page 33, the first paragraph, the last 3 lines of the first paragraph on page 33. It says, if you are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind. Notice what it says, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. That sounds like it coincides with the 3rd tradition. The only requirement for membership is a desire or honest desire, and one part of the book says, to stop drinking. Okay? So, with all of that being said, we realize now what we need to do in order to recover. Now we will see how Bill W. himself took step 1, and it is found on page 8 of our big book. Go to page 8. Page 8, the first paragraph. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Sound like he just surrendered. Sound like he just did step 1. So, with that being said, that pretty much concludes everything we need to know about step 1. Now, I want to take you through the 16 promises once you admit that you are powerless over alcohol, right? Let's start with page 17. Even though we read it already, I like to reiterate it because teaching is repeating the same thing over and over again until learning takes place. And by me being an educator and not an entertainer, I'm only interested in increasing the knowledge of the person being taught, whether that's a newcomer or an old timer, simply because we can only keep what we have by giving it away. And as I told you numerous times prior to this, the more I learn, the less I find out I know. So I am continuously learning, because when you stop learning, you stop living. So the first promise that's found that associates itself to step 1 is simply found on page 17. And it is the first paragraph, but the last sentence. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. That's why there's a chapter in the big book called There Is a Solution. A symbolizes 1. Why? There's one problem. Why? There's one solution. And we already know what the problem is. The problem is self. And we know what the solution is. The solution is a spiritual awakening. Okay? So, the second promise that's associated with step 1 is found on page 16. And it is, let's see, it is, there is, however, a vast amount of fun about all. It's on the second paragraph, the first sentence, right? Now, let's look at the third promise that the big book tells us about step one promise, right? Let's look at page 17, and let's look at the last 4 sentences of the second paragraph. The last 4 sentences of that paragraph. It says, the feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. Let's continue to read. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. So this is the big book's rendition of the message of hope. Let's go to page 25 now. Page 25. Let's look at the first paragraph, but the first thing that's highlighted, or it's an italicized print, it says simply, there is a solution. Now I'd like to draw your attention on page 25 yet and still. If you go down 1, 2, 3 more lines, it says, but we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we have been living it. Now let's look at the 6th promise on page 25. Let's go down 1, 2, 3, 4 more lines in that same paragraph. There are 3 promises in that paragraph. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence on which we had not even dreamed. Here comes the 7th promise. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe. Here's the 8th promise. Next sentence. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. Here is our 9th promise. He has commenced, meaning God, to accomplish these things for us which we could not or could never do by ourselves. Now I'd like to draw your attention to page 28. Page 28. This is the 10th step 1 promise. First paragraph. We in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. That's powerful. Step 11. The 11th promise, on page 29. Notice what it says, first sentence. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. 12th promise. Let's take a look at the 12th promise, and we're going to go to page 152. I believe it is 152. Here we go. Notice what it says. Second paragraph. Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you. Let's look at the rest of the promise. Let's go to the bottom paragraph, the last two sentences, if you will. Notice what it says. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties, for you will escape disaster together, talking about with the fellowship, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. Here is our 13th promise. And our 13th promise is the next paragraph, paragraph 1 on page 153. It may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. How can they rise out of such misery, bad repute, and hopelessness? The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. Should you wish them above all else and be willing to make use of our experience. See, that's deep. This is not a theory. A theory is something that hasn't been practiced. An experience is something that has. We are sure they will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that. Let's look at the 14th promise found on page 164 that's attached to step 1. These are just step 1 promises, right? We hear about the 8, 9-step promises and the 10-step promises, but let's look at the first step promises. Notice what it says, the first paragraph on page 164. Still you may say, but I will not have the benefit of contact with you who write this book. We could not be sure. God will determine that. So you must remember that your real reliance is always upon Him. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. All right, now we're about to find the 15th, and last but not least, the 16th promise. Here is the 15th promise, the next paragraph. Our book is meant to be suggested only. We realize we know only a little. I told you the more I learn, the less I find out I know. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. That sounds like more to be revealed. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. Why? Because we have recovered. We are no longer sick. The answer will come. Sound like promises to me. But they're contingent upon this. If your house, your own house, is in order. But obviously you can't transmit something you haven't got. How am I going to tell you how to recover if I've never recovered? See to it that your relationship, because that's what we're trying to recover, a relationship with God, with Him is right. And great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Last but not least, the 16th promise for step 1 is at the bottom of the last paragraph, but the last 4 lines of that paragraph. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. So now we know the goal, we know how to recover, we know the promises, but one thing I didn't tell you, what do we recover? It's found on page 72, and it is in the second sentence in the first paragraph. We have been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator. That's what we're trying to recover, because guess what? No relationship, no recovery. So I hope that I've given you a comprehensive overview of step one, and it simply comes down to this. Page 30. Do you concede or admit to your innermost selves that you're an alcoholic? If you say yes, you completed step one according to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you say no, get with your sponsor and continue to do some more reading to get in tune with what the big book says, or rewind and look at these videos again. So I hope I've been helpful to you, because it's all about helping others, because when we help others, we simply help ourselves. As always, please leave your comments, press the like button if we've added value to you, and by all means, our prayer is that you and your family increase more and more and continue to stay safe in these most perilous times, and remain optimistic that, you know what, you can recover too. All right? This is your big brother in recovery, Abraham. I'll be coming to you soon with another episode of Don't Believe the Hype. And also, we will start to take a look at step 2 in the preceding videos. All right? Talk to you soon. Bye.